Good evening. The planning board meeting on Tuesday, January 19th at 7 o'clock will come to order. There will be a couple hearings on our written agenda that will be continued. The first one will not be heard tonight, 1812 Turnpike Street. That is going to be deferred for how long?
Just until the next meeting. The review comments from Eggleston Environmental came in, and so he's working through those comments.
Okay. So that will be deferred, and also, you said 1665 Great Pond Road.
So that hearing was opened.
That will be deferred to March 1st?
March 1st.
March
Yeah,
1st.
the first meeting in
Okay.
March.
So everything else that is on our agenda will be heard tonight. The first item that we have tonight is 2302 Turnpike Street, Earthworks, Inc., Danny Gill.
Actually, John, we have a slight change to that because the representative for the applicant is not here yet, so he has requested that if we can move the subdivision first, which is a new public hearing.
Okay,
For
well, then
101.
we will do that. So that
Sorry.
makes it a little bit easier. Do you have anything to tell us about this?
So this is 101, 115 Sutton Hill Road, and actually, I didn't have that one up. Tom Zarico is the applicant, and he is proposing, it's technically a four-lot subdivision. One lot has an existing home and will remain as is. One lot has an existing house that may be raised. Tom has to go before the Historic Commission to gain approval to raise that. So it is undetermined at this time. You need you want to start with the locus of the property? So in theory, there'll likely be three houses, I believe, constructed and one existing. This lot highlighted here, you reviewed a couple of meetings ago for an A&R plan. So this is 115 Sutton Hill Road, and Tom had approval for an A&R that broke off the back section of this as not a buildable lot. He, at the time, had a very preliminary review of a potential subdivision that he'd be bringing forward, which would combine that back piece with 101 Sutton Hill Road. So you can see right in front of that L shape is 101. There's an existing house right there. Some know it as the Watson House. So this subdivision would then combine the back portion of map 60 lot 9 with map 60 lot 8 to form, again, a four-lot subdivision. Two houses exist. Tom's here to present a proof plan and then present a proposed site development plan which would not construct the roadway and would only construct driveway access to Sutton Hill Road. All set?
Thanks, Gene. I'm not sure if that's the best way to orient this in this room. This is new to me, but I'll do the best I can so that people can see it. This, as Gene said, is a proposed four-lot subdivision combining two parcels, which you saw previously through the A&R that we submitted a couple of months ago. Two new houses, potentially a third, depending on the ultimate disposition of the existing house that's out there that's in pretty rough shape. That's the location on Sutton Street. The existing conditions, again, both houses, 115 Sutton Hill Road and 101 Sutton Hill Road are here. This dashed green line is the watershed district line, watershed being to the left of it. The site is a gently sloping away from the street. There is some large pine growth, some other growth, and most of it is manicured lawn in varying degrees. There's a semicircle driveway access to the house at 101, and there's a separate driveway access over at 150. As you mentioned, this is the A&R plan that you saw before. That was the lot line that was endorsed a few months ago to combine this piece with this. That was a preliminary process for us. Since then, we've embarked on a more detailed analysis of this site and the development alternatives for it. We've gone through a variety of renditions over the last couple of months. This is just one of many things we considered as part of that alternatives analysis. Obviously, the plan that we submitted is the one that we think is the best, but some of these that we reviewed before had a proposed cul-de-sac more in the core of the 101 site. There was many things we didn't like about this particular approach to the site. First of all, it would have created a third driveway access from the site. It would have had one of the 3 homes in the watershed almost entirely. And it also, if you can envision that site with the Watson house on it in the core, this would have required some kind of determination about the ultimate disposition of that house. We didn't want to complicate this process with having to determine the disposition of that house this early in the process. So
Now, help me again, I'm not getting all the threads of which is the existing house you may or may not want to get rid of?
it isn't on this plan. This was a concept plan. That existing house is right in the core here, John. That's what I just mentioned, that this plan as an alternative that we thought about would have required determining the disposition of that house in advance rather than afterwards. Okay? That's one of the reasons we didn't want to propose this plan. We didn't want to have to deal with the...
And in this plan, three of the 4 lots get the frontage off of this cul-de-sac? Is that,
no, actually,
Can't even
one
see the
of them
lines.
does, and 2 of them partially. This
well,
is-
either they do or they don't. I mean, the frontage, the legal frontage.
Well, again, this is an alternative that we didn't present. but
No, I'm
these-
just trying to understand what you did,
These
that's all.
lots have frontage
Okay,
on Sutton Hill Road, as well as on
okay,
the
fair enough.
newly proposed
Yeah. Okay.
right-of-way. Okay, and this one has it exclusively on the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And of course, 115, this presumed using that newly formed lot line as was endorsed on the A&R plan for the balance of the 115 Sutton Hill Road house.
Okay.
Okay. Again, we looked at a variety of geometric arrangements, trying to optimize house locations, trying to minimize watershed impacts, that type of thing. This is just one more of those. There wasn't anything more significant other than realigning lot lines, trying to formulate good building sites and good access. Ultimately, the plan that we submitted is this plan, and this is the plan that was in your package, that was in the submission, in the application. I've highlighted a few things here so that you can see them, on the presentation board. And there's a couple of good reasons why we submitted this plan and think it's the best plan. This is actually the proof plan page from that submission. First of all, the 2 out of the 3 pre-existing non-conforming conditions on the 115 house would have been eliminated with this plan. A lot setback and frontage, both would be eliminated. They'd still have one on that side that would exist.
How did they end up with all those variances to begin with?
Well, this lot has existed since before the zoning requirements, for those setbacks came into play, John. I don't know what the vintage is exactly of that house, but it existed before the setback requirements came into play. Okay? So in any event, this reorientation of that cul-de-sac allows us to eliminate 2 of the 3 pre-existing non-conforming conditions. It also allowed a more generous remainder lot balance for the folks at 115. Initially, with the A&R plan, we had just a little over the 25,000 square foot minimum dedicated to that house. With this plan, with some delicate, working of the geometry of the lots and the layout, we're able to leave a balance of 29,300, which we think is just a nice thing to do. The lot's a little bit more pleasing in shape. Doesn't really change anything other than it leaves them a nicer lot. To continue, this cul-de-sac is a conforming 50-foot right-of-way, 120-foot diameter cul-de-sac, which provides access to these 2 homes. This has its frontage out on Sutton Street. As part of this application, we submitted a request to be granted a waiver from the construction of the cul-de-sac, consistent with something we've done 3 or 4 times in the past. I mean, the only access that would be provided from this cul-de-sac is to the house out in the back on Lot 2. Typically, we don't build a cul-de-sac for access just to one home. So,
Can you just point the watershed line on that?
oh yeah, I didn't highlight it on this one, but it's right here.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's lightly in there.
Yep.
I didn't highlight, I didn't want to make this too busy because the next page is really busy.
And in watershed line, what line is that?
That's the Watershed Protection District.
For which district? For how many feet?
No, this is just the edge of the watershed, not the district.
400?
No. It's actually
Okay.
it's
The
the
watershed boundary
it's the
itself.
watershed district boundary.
Okay.
The closest wetland is about 404 feet off in this direction, which I guess is kind of southeast, and that's about 404 feet to the actual corner of this site, not to any of our work. Our work is further from that.
So that puts all the work in the general zone.
Why is this house not accessing from the cul-de-sac? You said only that one up at the top?
Just the one, let me go on to the next page, which is actually, this is just a proof plan. Again, this was to show how we get access, how we create frontage, and that the geometry works, and that, a conventional conforming cul-de-sac could be built. The next page, which is the 4th page in your application package that we submitted, is this. Sorry for that. And I just took the liberty of highlighting those things that would be different with this plan, post-development, if you will. That would include a driveway, 2 new homes, and either another home or a modified home with the existing structure there on the lot with the Watson residence. I tried to keep this simple. I tried to keep it not too clouded here. Again, the watershed line runs right through here. One of the things that was good about this plan, and one of the reasons why we thought it was a better plan than any of the other alternatives too, was all of the construction of new homes is outside of the watershed. In fact, we'll get to Lisa Eggleson's comments a little bit later, but she asked us to do a calculation regarding the amount of disturbance on this site for additional regulatory filings if they're necessary. We'll address that in a couple of minutes. But inside the watershed, and this was one of my goals, was to try to make this project have no more impervious surface within the watershed district than it currently does. And the combination of eliminating the outbuildings, the garage, sheds, walkways, pavement that exists there, and then the adding in of the new facilities, impervious facilities in there, is essentially a net zero on the site. So within the watershed, it's within 50 or 60 square feet of plus or minus of impervious area before and after. So it's almost exactly the same.
So Tom, the circular circle at the end, you're not proposing to actually do that? That
No,
was
we're
just in
not.
your proof?
That was only
To say,
for proof.
we could do this?
Right.
Yeah.
Again, just to sort of reiterate, and this is probably...
That's hard to come across without,
All right. Well,
just looking at it on a laptop.
all right. Well, I apologize. We've done this a number of times, so I might not touch on some of the things that are repetitive for me.
That's okay.
But our proposal here, this proof plan, is just showing that we could build that cul-de-sac if it was required of us. We wanted to show, we didn't shrink the cul-de-sac, we didn't shrink any of the facilities. We wanted to prove that this is a conventional conforming layout. It doesn't make sense to build, typically, we've gone through this before, but we wanted to show that we could, just so that everybody understood that we weren't asking for something, extraordinary or different. Again, getting back to this, actually, let me get to this is the same page again, with a little bit more going on here. And let me tell you that we got comments back on this submission only in the last 2 or 3 business days. The engineers, Jack Sullivan Engineering, is working on these for formal filings or for formal, submissions. But we wanted to make proper use of everybody's time here. We didn't want to hold up the process. This is what will appear on the engineered plan in response to some of the comments that we got back last Wednesday and then later in the week and this morning from the police department. And I can go into those responses to some of those comments now if you want me to, before you start throwing questions at me. You may answer some of the questions, and then, or you can direct me as you please, if you'd rather just jump into some questions before I explain to you how we responded to the comments.
Remind me what the red dashed lines are.
Okay. Why don't I go into this for just a couple of quick minutes then? All right. Lisa Eggleston's comments. She made 5 comments. The first 2 related to stormwater management and a drainage analysis. In response to that, Jack is going to submit a more detailed, comprehensive drainage analysis at the end of this week or beginning of next week for her to review. That will come into play in a couple of items here, specifically with the mitigation areas that we showed initially as surface shallow infiltration areas for roof runoff and other impervious runoff collection and storage and infiltration. We're probably going to change that. We've done soils tests. We're probably going to change that to more conventional underground vaults, if you will. That'll be totally contained and will satisfy the mitigation for all the storm events that are required to be satisfied. And we'll confirm that through that analysis with Lisa over the next week and a half. So we're going to probably just keep them in more conventional format because I think it's a little bit less of a discussion topic that way, unless you all direct me to do otherwise. Her third comment related to drainage only in that it related to stormwater mitigation during construction. This is to answer your question, Peter. The red line indicates proposed erosion control, and that addresses her third comment. And what we proposed is erosion tubes. We've used them on most of our sites now. They're less ugly than black silt fence. They work great. They're easy to place, and they're easier to remove. We're proposing erosion control tubes circling each of the separate work areas, if you will, on each lot, so that each lot is a self-contained and mitigated entity, if you will. And that's what those red dashed lines are. Those erosion tubes also act as a good on-site sort of a limit of work boundary, if you will, a visual for workers and people to understand that you don't run equipment any further than that, and it contains the amount of disturbance that could go on the site. That relates to her fifth question or her fifth comment. She asked us to do calculations or review the amount of disturbance on the site in total. If it exceeds an acre, then we have to file other filings. Jack Sullivan's already done those calculations. It's 31,100 square feet, so it's about 70% of an acre. So it's below those thresholds pretty noticeably. So at least that answers that question. And I think she had one other question, Jean, didn't she? Number 4.
The landscaping chemicals, yeah.
Oh, but in response to her, she indicated, which I was unaware of, that typically or frequently in the watershed, the board asks for a restriction on those areas in the watershed on non-coal-based, coal-tar-based sealants on driveways, and obviously on some of the fertilizers. So we propose to add a comment or a note on the plan, probably in the decision as well, to address that. It's not a big deal. There's very little of this functional area, if you will, within the watershed anyway, so it only affects a small portion of the site.
That becomes a deep restriction, too.
Yeah, yeah. And then we had comments from...
So the police department primarily was around sight lines and access
right
on this bend, yeah.
Yes. Fire department, they, as they usually do, said they prefer sprinklers. I know this is a hot topic. There's a lot of things changing in that arena right now. What I proposed, and I've had lengthy discussions, and we put in a lot of these systems. NFPA 1 has been adopted as part of our building code. It's a requirement now. I don't know when that happened, sometime in the last year or 15 or 18 months or so, something like that. So I proposed, in response to the fire department's comments, to just add a comment that the new homes will be subject to NFPA 1, and whether that's sprinkler systems or access or whatever it happens to be, we have to comply with it anyway, but we can memorialize it with a note on the plan.
How long is the driveway to Lot 2, and how wide is it? Because I think that's going to have a bearing on the sprinkler.
Yeah, and it may, and that, I didn't want to get into a really lengthy discussion
I do.
on that. I don't mind doing it, but NFPA 1 is evolving, it's changing, and if a driveway, for the most part, it's very complex, but if a driveway is longer than 50 feet, you either have to widen it to a 20-foot wide access roadway for a fire vehicle, or have a fire sprinkler system, one or the other. Is that, Lynn, is that pretty much how you understand it?
Yes, but what do you propose, how long is that driveway start?
That driveway is about 190 feet.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Center of the
yeah.
cul-de-sac is
Okay.
160.
Okay.
Okay.
And then how wide are you proposing it?
Well, here's the thing. Since that is a standard that we have to comply with, whether it's from you or from the building department or the fire department, they're not going to sign off on it anyway.
Right.
We're not going to pave any wider. The practical response, if we will either put a fire sprinkler system in there to comply, that's one of the options that we sort of have, if you will, under NFPA 1 at least, or we pave a standard 10 or 12 foot wide driveway and then widen the apron 8 feet with a wearing surface, which is typically a gravel base, not just a skim coat, but a gravel base that's sufficient for fire vehicle access. We can indicate that on the plan as either an alternative or an option, but we wouldn't want to. It's a complex regulation. We don't want to start widening driveways to 20 feet wide just for that occasional, potential use. But
I also don't want to try to get around it by saying you're going to not have a roadway and have it, if it has to be 20 feet, it's going to be 20 feet paved or put in the sprinkler system. I don't want to start getting in.
It could be 20 feet with gravel sides as
Is-
well.
No, it even calls
Yeah.
for gravel. A gravel
gravel
roadway
side.
is a wearing surface. I mean,
Okay.
that's the way it's
Okay,
defined.
gravel roadway.
I mean,
Okay.
we've looked into that
Okay.
in a lot of detail.
Yeah.
We don't. It would be foolish for us to start doubling. I mean, as a practical matter, probably the vast majority of the homes that have been built in North Andover in the last 20 years, you're more than 50 feet from the edge of the pavement of the street to the front door. Every one of those today would have to have a 20-foot wide driveway. Every single one of them.
Or sprinklers, which
Or
are
sprinklers,
pretty
yes.
reasonably cost, and they save lives.
I used to be a very big fan of sprinkler systems. I'm not anymore. We've had our significant challenges with them. I have one in my house. It's turned off.
You have one in my house, too.
Yes, you do. I can't turn yours off, but I can turn my own off. There are issues with them. Again, I don't want to tangent too much, but.
Well, I think it's something that I want to hear, we're going to want before we make a decision, because we're going to give you a waiver on building the subdivision cul-de-sac and everything like that, which would be a 22,
Absolutely.
So I think, just saying that we're going to leave it open, I don't think it's going to be the right answer for the final decision.
And if that's the way you
I think
collectively feel.
we're going to want to make a decision as a board, because
Yeah.
this has been brought up.
Well, if I can just comment on that. I mean, NFPA 1 is pretty demanding. I mean, it's part of our code now. It's not something we can, that we can get around or ignore.
Right.
It requires us to do one or the other.
Right.
I mean,
But I just think we want to know, is it going to be this or this? That's the whole thing.
Well, and I understand that you would want that, but I would prefer that it be enough that we comply with that regulation one way or another.
Well,
I'm not
I
living in
don't
all
think
these
we ever
homes.
let people say they're going to either pave or put a gravel driveway in. They've always made a decision when they submit plans. I've never had that with any other plan, any other process. It's like, this is what we're gonna do. So it's never left open like that.
Lane being accounted for, so that one, the decision did not require sprinklers, right?
Right, there was no waivers. It was a totally conforming conventional subdivision. It wasn't a PRD, there was no special permits, so there was no...
But is the front door more than 50 feet away from the roadway on the house? It's a 30-foot,
Yeah,
it's a 30-foot setback required.
Well, with a 30-foot setback, if you folks understand the challenge there, you have a 50-foot right-of-way, you have 22 or 24 feet of pavement. It isn't always centered, it's generally centered, but on an existing road, it's going to be off-centered. You have a 30-foot setback, and if your house is even 5 feet further back than it has to be by zoning regulation, that house is going to be more than 50 feet from the street.
Okay, well, that's on our list, so let's move on to the next thing.
All right. Obviously, I expected to talk about that a little bit, so, okay, so we've talked about that. The police department,
The DPW is in support of waiving the roadway construction. They do not deem it necessary, although no water can drain towards the street.
Right,
It's
and
their
that's-
requirement for any driveway or roadway.
yeah, and they reconfirm that when they sign off on the permits as well at that stage, so they have another swing at that pitch as we go forward, so they always have that luxury. And again, this site slopes away from the street, not towards the street, so it kind of is a natural to comply with DPW's preference on the driveway grades. The police department submitted, and we just got this today, a comment about site distance, not in the direction heading towards Sandra Lane, but in the opposite direction, heading back up Sutton Hill Road, which has a reverse curve there. I only got that a few hours ago. We did some looking into it.
And what is the site distance?
Well, I only got the comment at 1 or 2 o'clock today. Limited amount of time to respond to this.
It's not good.
No, it is good, actually. I spent my whole afternoon looking into this. I spoke with E.J. Folds, who issued the comments. I was down at DPW. This is the DPW map with the driveways and the access points. Again, we're not proposing any new access points with this proposal. There's 3 houses, there's 3 driveways. One driveway is from one tail or one apron of the existing driveway. The other combined driveways, which are separate but parallel for just the entrance
Yeah, I
of
want
the
to
apron.
come back to that after you go through. I think
That requires, we're using the same access point that exists today. It requires it being maybe 4 or 5 feet wider than it exists today in order to have twin accesses there. But the site distance, and again, this was very preliminary. We have to do a little bit more detailed work, but it was down at DPW today looking at this measure. If you look at, my vehicle is parked at the driveway, the one that's really in question, the one that has to look to the east. That circle there is the mailbox. It's hard to see, but that circle is the mailbox at 80 Sutton Hill Road. Now, 80 is across the street. That's the west house. That's, but you can see it. You can see that mailbox very clearly there, across the street. Granted, but that, based on the DPW measure, is 263 feet. That's more than sufficient. I mean, if somebody's driving the way they're supposed to be driving there, it is more than sufficient. So we've already confirmed that. You can see the mailbox there. You can see it on the map. You can see the distance from there, and that's what it was scaled to be. The visibility in the opposite direction towards Sandra Lane is, I don't know how far, but you can see that it's almost infinite. It's probably 800 or more feet. It goes well beyond Sandra Lane. That's the fire hydrant that exists right outside of the entrance. Having said that, we're going to provide that information. We're going to do a little bit more analysis. I pasted off. I didn't have a tape measure 263 feet long. I pasted off. That's pretty accurate. We're going to provide that information to the police department and reconfirm it. The only thing that gets in the way of extended site distance there, just for the record, is 2 street trees, which are compromised already out in front, that the trunks of which probably prevent another 60 or 80 feet of visibility because they're on the curve. They're in a place where we would never be allowed to put a street tree today. They're 5 feet from the pavement. And those trees, if they're considered to be, you know, a concern, then I think it's something that ought to be talked about. But I would never propose to take down another tree, certainly not a tree that's not my own property. So, in any event, we've looked into that as much as we could in the last 2 or 3 hours and think that it should be fine. One of the things that I was intending to propose was adding additional signage both during construction and post-construction, just because, you know, again, these are streets that, you know, I think the people that travel these streets generally are people who belong on these streets. It's not a throughway necessarily to you know, to someplace out of town. People know the streets, but I think most people probably travel the speeds that they're supposed to. But it doesn't hurt to add some signage there, I guess, to control that a little better. So anyway, that's my response to that. And other than that, I think, was there any other comments that we got back?
So Conservation submitted a letter, I believe, Scott Erickson, indicating that there's no wetlands within conservation jurisdiction.
That's correct, yeah.
I provided that information to Jen Hughes. I haven't received comments back, doesn't mean I won't get them, but I haven't yet.
Well, he was out there months ago, and didn't just walk the site, did soil borings and tests to make sure there wasn't any hydric soils out there. So, I mean, he did his job, did what he's supposed to do, reviewed all the maps, and, you know, so we're comfortable with that.
Okay, I had actually one observation on that. My observation is that the lot, not the one in the back, but the one to the right of it, this one, yep.
With the existing home?
Yeah, is that the existing home?
Yes.
Okay. Be that as it may, you're creating a new lot, right, for that home, right? If you're going to keep it?
Yes.
The problem you've got is that you're trying to create a separate curb cut for that, and you're not accessing the lot over the frontage. The frontage of the lot comes from the paper street. My preference would be very much for you to run the driveway into the paper street and access it there and eliminate a curb cut. Move it up.
You come in a little further. Parallel them like we did on Great Pond Road, John?
No. What I'm saying is that whatever the driveway is for that lot should not go straight out to the street. It should go there. Yeah.
Okay, right now it comes off the radius. It comes over its own frontage. It does come over its own frontage. That's why we laid it out that way.
Well, wait, how many feet of frontage is there?
Well, the frontage starts right at this. This is the lot line between Lot 3 and Lot 4. It comes to right here. That's the point. That's the lot corner, John. So its frontage begins right there and runs to here. Its frontage begins here. That's why we put that driveway there. We needed to maintain 125 feet of frontage here.
Is there 125? I can't tell.
Yes, there is. On this, there's 125 here. On this lot, because there has to be.
On that one, right. On the
Yes.
front, yeah.
Yes.
But on this one there, I can't tell where the...
Well, the frontage begins at that common point, John. It begins at the front lot corner with Lot 4.
Oh, it begins right there.
It begins
okay.
right there. And so
then
it
it continues where?
And then it continues to here.
Okay.
It's got, I don't know, 175, 180 feet of frontage.
So you're going to
Onto a
have
road that you're not
two... the point
Onto a
still
road that
remains.
you're not
Yeah, so it
creating.
is,
Right.
so it's not coming straight down.
Well, that's the
Yeah,
point.
they're
If
adding
you think about the
walking.
one that's being built now on Great Pond Road, which is exactly the same sort of thing, the driveway goes into the paper street and then goes out. Because what you're then basically having is you're having two access points right next to each other.
Right, exactly. Which I think works wonderfully. I mean, that's what I live on. I mean, common driveways, I've said this before, are
Yeah, but it's not a common driveway, Tom. That's private road. That driveway is a private road.
oh yeah, absolutely, but I'm not sure.
It's different.
Right, but what's the difference, John? I mean, and I'm asking this, not arguing with you. What is the difference if I bring this in here versus here? It's still coming over its own frontage.
Well, yeah, except what you're doing is you're creating two separate curb cuts instead of one.
You can actually have two cars pulling out at the same time within 5 feet of each other side by side, or 2 cars pulling in.
Well, you can there now, that's what exists there today. I mean, I
When
understand
it
that,
exists, doesn't exist there today.
well, sure it does.
There's only 2 houses
There's only 2
there.
houses. The driveway's over here to the other one. They're 75 feet apart, the driveways.
Existing conditions. This is a circular driveway. It's got a wide apron here, and the other apron is here. These driveway access points were laid out.
Yeah, but those aren't
That's-
side by side.
They're not side by side, they're all to the same house.
Yes, that's true. But you said that we needed another curb cut. I mean, we don't, I mean, this is a common, this is a common access point.
He doesn't mean another, he means 2 instead of 1.
Yeah, what I'm saying is 2 instead of 1. One next to, you have 2 side-by-side curb cuts.
Right.
And one of them which is a road, technically.
They're both over the road, right?
They're both over the, well,
Well, one's not completely.
the actual intersection, if you will, the apron that intersects with the existing public way is in the current existing public way.
No,
Where it
I'm
is.
talking about the new, go back to the other one.
Why do you have that point there? Why wouldn't you just make this a big, wider?
Well, I envision
Thing.
that the same, I thought this worked wonderfully where I live on Great Pond Road. We have 2 parallel driveways, they're parallel for a very short distance, and there's a break between them. For a cobblestone or a stone break, there's a visual break, so that they are distinctly not common driveways. Common driveways do cause complications. We've had them before. You know, these come together, if you will, at the intersection in the current existing right-of-way. They don't connect.
But if
If you
you-
want them to connect, they can connect. I just don't think it makes sense to.
But see, if you were building the subdivision, we'd only have 1 car going out, 1 car going in. Now you can actually have four cars, 2 in, 2 out, because you're making 2 separate driveways opposed to 1 roadway.
Well, I mean, I don't mind building the roadway. I just think it makes no sense. I mean, these are, either way, there's gonna be a car or 2 and a few people living
Yeah,
here
but-
and a car or 2 and a
But
few
you'd
people
only
living
have,
here.
but you wouldn't, it's not a 4-lane road, it wouldn't be a 4-lane road. You'd never have 4 car, it's 2 in, 2 out, at the same time, that close together.
How do you have 2 in and 2 out?
Because-
These are 10-foot driveways. You can
Oh,
have one
so
coming
you-
in, one coming out, just like on any other road. It's a 10-foot wide
So
paved area
so it's
each.
only 10 feet, so someone can't pull out and pull in at the same time?
Each one is 10 feet.
Okay.
Somebody can be pulling into
Okay.
one while somebody
Someone
else is
can
pulling
pull
out.
into this house and out of this house at the
Okay.
same time.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
It's 10 feet assuming there's sprinkler systems, right? That's still that
Separate- It's only paved for 10 feet anyway, so.
Okay, so your preference is you think 2 separate driveways side by side work better. So we'll just go back, we'll take that under advisement. I'll think about it, maybe you can convince me. I'll go look at your house. I'm not a big fan of it. I understand why you don't like common driveways. It's technically not a common driveway, but it functions equivalently as if it were a common driveway. I agree with you if you did that. So,
Yes, it does.
yeah.
But again, I mean, there's practical issues with common driveways. We've talked about
Well,
that
there's,
before.
because you got 2 people.
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
let's face it. I mean,
But
it doesn't
that
always work.
sort of doesn't
Yeah.
completely become our problem.
And honestly, I mean, our situation, which I don't know that it was done anywhere else, but it works wonderfully. It works great. I mean, it just does. I mean, a car can pull in, a car can pull out. They're each on their own driveway.
So what you're saying is the more curb cuts, the better? That's effectively what
Well-
you're saying, and I don't think you believe that. It's just a convenience factor. If you could have figured out a way not to do it
Well,
that way.
but are you saying that you'd rather I put in a single 10-foot wide or 12-foot.
No, what I thought I was going to see on that house is a driveway that cuts across to the paper street and then joins across, rectangular across. That's what I thought I was going to say.
Oh, at a perpendicular sort of.
Yeah, more of a perpendicular thing. That's what I thought I was going to say.
I mean, John, we could certainly do that, and it's not a big deal. The issue then becomes that there's some brief bit that's common. And that's, you know, as a practice, I mean, I know it doesn't really matter here, but out in the world of people and emotions and, you know, and all of that stuff, it makes a big difference.
But
It's a challenge for selling a house. It's what I do.
But is it common because it's across a paper road?
It would still be common. This house would need an easement from this cul-de-sac, as is always the case when we do a cul-de-sac.
But it's a little bit different. I mean, I understand exactly where you're going, and I understand your perspective, but it's not like the long thing is it's not a common driveway. It's accessing a private road. And they're two separate things.
Yeah, who's going to be responsible for the private road that goes into?
This owner.
How do you make them responsible for the
This
private
gets-
road when everybody has a right of? I'm just curious.
It's a private road. This becomes owned by this gets deeded with this lot.
Then the other lot doesn't have frontage.
Sure it does.
Because it's a private road that belongs to one person that's not built. Right?
It's not the way we've interpreted it in the past. I suppose if we want to reinvent that, we could go back. We've never interpreted it that way. And we've always deeded off as a requirement of this board. We've deeded that to one.
All the rest of the land to one or other of the
Yes.
lots.
So-
We ought to see whether we consistently do it that way.
But you have done, we've done this, this is our fourth or fifth one of these.
Yeah, but you're not the only person that's done them.
But you've asked me to do the same thing.
No, I think it's a good thing to do. So I'm not arguing that. I'm just, it's more due diligence on our side to understand whether our practice is consistent
You know,
of the way you do it is the way everybody else does it. I just don't know.
I think it's a sensible way of doing it.
Yeah.
It's resulted in.
Look, I mean,
challenges.
I'm not, I'm willing to listen to what you're saying about that. I think we could table that. I understand why you want it to be separate in certain circumstances. I would say if it were a busy road, I would be more inclined to be concerned about it than on a road like this that's, you know, kind of on a secondary street. But, you know, I'll have to think about it. So if we could just table that as a...
Yep.
Yeah. Pete, do you have any questions?
No, good discussion, and
Yeah.
let's table it and think about it.
Yeah. Dave?
You know, I was just wondering, why did we have a frontage thing in the first place? And I know where I used to live in New York, why we had it, is because they wanted to prevent people with large lots from building a lot of homes on them. And I've seen more inventive ways of getting around those things since I've been on the board.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it, though, Dave, because I don't look at it as getting around it. I look at it as complying with the rules and regulations. I hear what you're saying, but...
Right, it's just that the original
I don't
intent
know,
of the
but
people.
no, I agree wholeheartedly with Tom. He's not getting anything that he wouldn't get otherwise. He could put that cul-de-sac in. It's very clear he can build it.
Yeah, that's the...
But
if he
it logically
doesn't,
doesn't make sense either to him or to us to actually do it. So I don't think he's skirting any rules.
I mean,
No, I'm not saying he's skirting a rule.
Well,
It's
it would
just
have a
that
large impact on the
the
house
whole thing
values if you
of
built it.
the frontage
Yeah, it would be
is being
less.
It would
circumvented.
be a lot less if you had that big enormous cul-de-sac that took out of the land of those units, so.
well, I don't
Yeah.
think so at all. I think this would add value.
I
I don't
do
think the
too.
neighbors would want it.
Yeah.
I would personally much rather live on this cul-de-sac.
Me too. My kid
Absolutely.
could ride a bike.
Enhanced value for sure. A nice island out in the middle of the cul-de-sac. You know what I mean, seriously, that would be a wonderful. The thing is, it doesn't make sense to have a 160-foot cul-de-sac with a fire hydrant and catch basins that the town has to maintain and flush and plow and salt and repair and all of that stuff. That's just impractical just to get access to one house.
Yeah, right.
That house
Doesn't
won't
make-
pay for 1/3 of the burden on
But-
the taxes.
But so
It makes sense.
if you don't build the cul-de-sac, I don't understand why that house is considered having frontage, because there's no street there then. It's a driveway, essentially.
Well, no.
I don't
The
understand
frontage is-
that.
It's frontage on a legal way, but what we're doing is we're waiving construction of the road. So the frontage is established off of that, but in the same way the frontage of the house and the lot in the back is established off of that.
Frontage isn't created by pavement. People
Yeah.
make, it's not, the pavement has nothing to do with the frontage.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is, but it took me a while before I realized that.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with the pavement.
But they have the
It has to
frontage,
do with
but-
the lot geometry.
So,
But I question if you give that paper road to the lot, if you still have the frontage. If it's a private way on another, privately owned, you do not, I don't know if you have
No, you
actually.
do.
How?
you do.
Oh.
Well, the frontage is the frontage. The frontage is on the road.
It's not a road anymore because you gave it to the other lot, one of the lots in its entirety.
Well, that's,
But it could have been a road.
No, I know,
well, that's what I want to go back
That's
and
the
I want
only
to look
part-
at.
that's the only part I
what I want to go
question
back
is if
and
you
look at
give
and
it
see what we've
to
done in other
lot
cases.
two.
Because I'm just not sure. I mean, you could, I've seen cases where it's been given an easement to the people.
the easement, that's a different story, yeah. I
but,
think then
yeah.
that's, yeah.
So we'll,
And just as a point of, to comment on, we have done this before. These things have been reviewed by dozens of attorneys. Not that necessarily makes it
Nope.
legitimate. I understand that, no offense, and I apologize, but many people have looked at these in the past. Title insurance companies have insured without
Yeah.
question. So, I mean, I don't want to reinvent, I don't have.
no, fair enough, fair
Too
enough.
much of a
Okay,
discussion
let's
on
move on. What else we got?
So I believe there are butters here.
Okay, yeah, I do notice there are a couple of butters. Does anybody have a question? If you do, you feel free to ask it, and you can come up here and introduce yourself and ask your question. We'll try to get you an answer.
I did have a question.
Yeah, if you could just come up to the front.
Just state your name and address.
Sure.
My name is Mark Bohr. I live at 10 Heath Circle, so we're on the downhill side of the houses to the right. Yeah,
In
so
this
like,
area?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
To the north, yeah.
And out of that hill comes a spring. So there's a spring of water that flows down the hill across Heath Circle and then down the hill across the Gaffney's lot and our lot. And so my concern was just, were you aware of that and what could be done to,
Where,
okay, was anything disturbing that or are you doing anything to take care of that?
we did soils test recently. We had a small excavator out there in response to some of the comments. We do know where the maximum high groundwater level is based on that soils stratification. In fact, I had this discussion with Jim the other day. I know that even the house that exists there is set probably in the groundwater because there's a couple of sump pumps in that old basement, and I know it's an issue in that whole vicinity because of the soil conditions. We're very deliberate about not putting the houses in the groundwater, first of all. The groundwater is at 38 to 42 inches typically in most of the testing locations that we checked. So those mitigation systems, those underground catchment storage and infiltration systems for each of the homes will be placed above that groundwater level, so that when they fill up from the runoff that comes from the roofs and the gutters and the driveways and everything, those systems have the capacity to store the 100-year storm and then slowly percolate it back into the soils. So we have to prove, one of the things we have to prove to this board and to the outside consultant and to DPW and everybody else is that we're not going to increase the rate or amount of runoff beyond our site. We touched on that a little bit earlier. And that's just a question of sort of scientific realities and calculations and that type of thing. But we do have to prove that. So.
I mean,
answer the question?
you know,
Okay.
I guess the one point that I would make is that in all the years that I've been on the board, when you have weeping streams or, you know, some sort of water flow on a property, you have to be extremely cautious of what you do. You have to put even more careful thought into it than normal, because, you know, I know this is not a super hilly thing, so it's less of an issue, but, you know, there have been any number of times where we've had hills, building on hills, and there's been streams in the hills, and it's really created a lot of
There's
problems.
perch water
so,
tables. I
yeah.
mean, these are things, I mean, that we have to be conscious of. I mean, we built 200 houses or so in town now. I mean, when we have a doubt, we try to stay above it. If we can't stay above it for some technical reason or some alternative reason that takes precedence, then we always put in internal drains and make the effort. And you know that, Dave, to just in the event that we don't know everything that's happening underground. So,
Is that a higher than typical water table, water?
it varies, and it being high on a hill has really very little, if anything, to do with it. It's more dependent upon the soil conditions that are there. The soils are hard packed, and they hold the water up from percolating any deeper into the soils, I think. So.
And I know that this lot itself doesn't slope, but from kind of the lot line there slopes directly down the hill.
There's a more, and in fact, we're going to be adding, we can't go out on other people's properties and survey those properties unless we ask everybody's permission and coordinate everything, but we will get from the topographical maps the extensions of these lines, which is another thing that Lisa Eggleston had asked for, that we extended our lines about 10 or 12 or 15 feet beyond our borders. She wants to see it out a little bit further. We're not going to be going anywhere near those things, but some of that will appear on these plans, for the next update. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Any other?
I also did. Can I just, Jim? Do you want me to sort of comment on our
Sure.
conversations?
Yeah. I'm Jim Panos, 85 Sutton Hill Road. Go ahead.
Okay. Which is the next house to Lot 4 here. We were out on site. He contacted me pursuant to the notice. Expressed his concerns about, a variety of things, just wanting to know what was going on. But we also had talked about this particular house, if in fact it gets built there, is it's shown compliant with zoning 20 some odd feet from the side lot line. But he's got a nice house there that he just moved into, and was concerned for his privacy and his, the impact on him. We had a discussion out there that, as this board knows too, we try to build our houses not any more vertical than they need to be. We try to keep them human scale, more cape designs, not push the maximum heights that we can. But having said that, if I have a customer who wants a colonial two-story home there, then I'm going to try to satisfy that customer too. So I said to Jim that if in fact we build this plan and develop the site as it's proposed or something close to this, we'll put in an evergreen screen in a canopy of the view line from that house to his house and vice versa, about probably 60 or 70 feet of 10 to 12 foot arborvitaes as a courtesy to keep privacy on that side of things. Okay. Just was that?
Yeah, and Tom was gracious in coming out, and we was very understanding of the concern that we have. We just moved in less than a year ago. Actually, owned the home about a year, but moved in May and did quite a bit of work with the fence, and it's got a pool back there, and really enjoy the privacy. And Tom was understanding of that and suggested that as a solution. And I checked with my wife, and she was pleased with that. I did ask Tom a question about it. Again, considering the privacy issue, and I know you've got the water protection area there, but I also know that there's homes on it, across the street, down the street, everywhere, built on it, and he's at 41 feet setback from the street.
Yeah.
And I said, is there any way of moving it up, 5, 10 feet, just so the corner of the house might infringe on that area? Because I didn't know it was there necessarily. Tom told me about it and said that's why he put the home there. But I guess as an abutter, I'm just wondering how much harm or what could be the issue if it were to move up just a few feet, which might mitigate the issue with the trees. Maybe we wouldn't have to put 70 feet, maybe put 50 feet because of the way the angles are. I don't know, but I just didn't know how much of an issue that is with the board and for Tom to do it. And
It's not an issue for me. That's something that I explained to you at the beginning of the presentation, that I tried to keep all of the new stuff as much as possible outside of the watershed, just as respecting what I know are the concerns of this board and the town in general. So I left it outside of it. If you folks don't mind, I certainly don't mind being a good neighbor and pulling it, 8 or 10 feet closer to the street. That means that it will in part be within the watershed protection district. It's still way outside of the 400-foot zone, so from that standpoint, it shouldn't matter, but that's really something that I need to be directed on. I'm not going to propose it unless you say that your concern and consideration for one of the neighbors would move you in that direction. But I'm happy to do either one.
I mean, from my personal perspective, it doesn't make any difference as long as the drainage works.
Yeah. Okay. And if that's consistent with other folks.
Yes, it's outside the 400 feet.
It's well outside of it for
Yeah,
what
so-
comes indicated.
All right.
So as long as it's outside the 400 feet.
We'll make a little modification to that on the plan.
Thank you.
And hopefully, that'll.
It's best to have Lisa comment on the way you're going to build it.
I'm sorry?
Then Lisa can comment on where it's going to be, and we don't have to get another
Well,
set of comments.
correct, and I'm sure she'll make the comment that it's inside as long as you folks know in advance. Yeah, she told me to do it, that's okay. I'm
And
okay with that.
I just had one question from when I was speaking with my wife. She was just asking about the water containment areas and all of that. She just said, is that going to, impact? I know you talked about how it percolates back in. She was just asking, does that mean there'll be more insects or anything like that? And I said, I don't know.
Okay.
So maybe I'll ask
This
that.
is a good question, and I don't want to make this longer than it has to be for everybody here, but, we initially put in these shallow infiltration areas and indicated them on the plan out in the very rear of the lots, just to get them out of the primary yard areas. Just after hearing some comments and knowing and understanding some of the neighbors' concerns and stuff, I just decided to go more conventional, to bring those stormwater management facilities up close, 8 or 10 or 12 feet from the houses, up close to the development areas, and put them in the ground so that they're not an open wet area to breed mosquitoes or anything else.
And just one other thing, when I was talking to Tom, he did mention, because there is some high water table there, as you mentioned, and I thought Tom was very gracious in the way he explained and how he would build the homes and all that, and try to avoid any impact on the groundwater, and, so it wouldn't channel differently toward basements that are already sometimes compromised, but who knows?
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yes.
I have one question. I'm the butter. My name is Arthur Brace, 55 Heath Road. And right there. So I just wanted to second the proposal about moving the house up. That would be great. Because right now I have just a view straight to Sutton Hill Road. The other question Mark addressed was about the drainage, which I was concerned about, but it sounds like you've taken care of that. And then when you said that you're not going to build houses in the water table, does that mean the basement's going to be raised?
Well, it's a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance. I mean, we try not to put them in the groundwater because there's a risk. There's a risk, even though it's a seasonal condition and it may only happen once in history. We don't like to challenge Mother Nature on that. So everybody who knows my work knows that I try to keep the houses close to the ground. I don't want them to be towering up out of the ground.
Right.
But we have to acknowledge the groundwater conditions and make sure that we're not setting ourselves or our homeowners up for a condition, a wet basement condition that we should have known about. So the answer is we try to strike our balance. I mean, typically, if we have to raise something up a little bit, you may be familiar with one of the houses that we built down at the end of Milk Street, almost to Chestnut Street a couple of years ago. High groundwater there. We had to raise that foundation up somewhat. We built a beautiful stone wall with a granite cap that mimics everything out in the historic homes out on Chestnut Street. Those are the kind of things we do. If we have to raise them up, we don't just mound them up and let them sit high up out of the ground. Naturally, if you go by that house, second to last house on Milk Street heading from...
I know that house, yes, well.
That's the kind of thing we typically do.
Okay. But it would result in the roof being higher.
It would. It may affect things 2 or 3 feet. I mean, if the groundwater's at, say, 42 inches, it may affect things 2 feet in the final analysis. So it's not a huge impact.
Okay, great.
All right.
Any consideration for a screen on the back would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, understood. Get your message.
Okay, I think we have what we need for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all. And these guys know all how to contact you. It might be easier for you to work directly with them.
Yeah, I think those things at this point, we'll just deal with whatever things we need on a permanent basis.
Good.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Okay, we're back to 2302 Turnpike Street, Earthworks.
Yep, so you may recall this hearing opened at the December 15th meeting. They continued this last meeting with no evidence heard. There was a question in regards to the use and the primary versus the accessory use for this project. You asked me to consult with town council and Jerry Brown again, the building commissioner. I did both. Tom's response was that the bylaw does not provide a precise description of the numerical calculation as to the primary use and the accessory use. He reviewed Jerry's determination. He has deferred to Jerry being the zoning enforcement officer, but in his opinion, he did not believe that Jerry's opinion was capricious, didn't have basis. So he asked me to review his response back with Jerry, which I did, and Jerry has confirmed his original opinion that the use is allowed for retail and office as the primary and the storage and parking as accessory.
Okay, not sure I agree with that, but
that was their response.
Yeah, okay.
So the applicant is Earthworks. Jill Mann is representing the applicant. You need a locus for this. So the property is at the corner of Shopness Pond Road and Turnpike Street. Does everybody remember? It's right directly across from a daycare center there.
Yeah.
Like when the temperature went down.
So Lisa Eggleston has provided a preliminary review. The applicant is responding to that review. DEP's made some comments, Conservation's made a few comments, and so that is being worked on at this point. So I thought tonight is really just do a refresher of the site design. DPW has submitted comments. The project is being reviewed by the Conservation Commission as well.
So essentially, the purpose, exactly as Ms. Enright said, was to come back to the board report with regard to what the permitted uses of the property are pursuant to this zoning bylaw, as well as just review generally the site. It is under review by Lisa Eggleston. We have had commentary periods, so we have actually gotten her comments and then responded to her. But we do probably have one more revision. We probably will have final sets, at least from her perspective, at your next hearing date. We have appeared before the Conservation Commission and been doing a little bit of work. For example, they asked us if we would be willing to, or if Mr. Gill, who is here this evening, Dan Gill is in the back from Earthworks, and Chris Perez, site design engineer from Williams & Scratches, is also here with me this evening. So what we have been asked to do by the Conservation Commission is to consider making this front depression, which really does function as a detention area, as a rain garden. And Mr. Gill absolutely thought that would be a great idea and is willing to do that, and he's done so. One of the other comments in general was just to keep any and all structures out of the 50-foot area, 50-foot setback. And we did move, so this plan doesn't show it, because again, we wanted to give to you one final set instead of a series of revisions that you were going to get, and then get one before and then another and then another. but we have actually complied with that and are in the process of getting that approved by the Conservation Commission.
Can you just point which line is the 50-foot?
Oh, most certainly. I have to put my glasses on too. Okay, so this is the 100-foot that's marked in blue, and right here, it's very, it's not marked in any
Yeah,
color.
I see it. Thanks.
You're very welcome. So we have planned that. We did, in fact, have that TRC meeting when we,
There is a shack or a house on the
Oh.
property line.
Yes, there
Where-
certainly is. It is a should you see. I thought it was, to be quite frank, I thought it was vacant.
Oh,
It's not?
Oh, it's not.
Oh, no, it's not vacant?
It's an existing single-family home that is occupied. And the only reason I knew that is I drove by,
Okay,
because my
just to give
sister-in-law
you
was
mark
around.
where
You saw
it
the
is.
smoke moving on?
Smoke.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just kind of mark on the proposal.
I mean, so it's right here
I
in the
never
middle,
saw that.
and then I'll show you where
Yeah.
it is. So if you can see, it's right in the middle. So just, here's the right-of-way. So if you close the page, it is literally right here.
Okay, that helps me look, that's where I hear you.
Oh, you can see it. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, it's right forward. I have to put my glasses on yet again. Here's the square, and then there's an outbuilding like that dilapidated garage, and it's right here. So here's the primary, here's the garage.
From the garage.
That's really in poor condition. I mean, the home's in, it is definitely a tear down, but I thought it was vacant too. So, obviously, Mr. Gill's intention is to raise both structures and to really clean up the area. This is basically the entrance point into North Andover, and his intent is to landscape it beautifully so that whether you're going to one of the playing fields or the transfer station behind this project right here, or if you're just simply traveling down 114 into North Andover, to make it be a very nice viewpoint. We had discussed briefly the actual structures in the architectural design of the site, but I did want to just go over generally this particular site and explain a couple of things relative to the access points. We met and discussed with the DPW the various access points as well as with Ms. Enright, and everybody basically agreed, look, try and keep it all off of 114, and we did do that. So we have this entrance point for the primary use. So basically, if anybody's coming in and going to utilize the property, basically the general public, they will come in the first entrance point. If there is traffic that's going to be using any of the rear parts, so anybody who actually has a business there will enter over the second entrance, and that's what this particular entrance is for. And just to give you an understanding about what the burdens of this particular property are, for the most part, the vehicles that will be accessing this property are going to be pedestrian vehicles, or I shouldn't call it pedestrian vehicles, but residential, normal vehicles, not commercial vehicles. You might have a couple of 450, 550, and 150 trucks, but that's predominantly what the use will be. As far as any sort of heavy truck traffic, you might get a delivery once a month by a tractor trailer, and that's not going to be frequent. And then you will have some dump truck activity, but again, maybe that's a couple of times a week. I mean, we just don't get many of the very heavy vehicle traffic. That's just not what this site is. And I think that may have been the concern of the board when we were discussing the uses. So that basically is your access points. With regard to the stormwater basin, you can see them are being shown on the property, and those are continuing to be in existence. There are roof infiltrators as well, so there'll be some underground storage of water, but that's basically clean water and roof infiltrators. The back building, as we had discussed before, is going to be indoor storage for Danny Gill's business, who will occupy the majority of the retail space and a couple of the offices as well. That's going to be solely indoor storage. What they'll be is they're going to be structures that'll start, they have a sloping roof, so they'll start at about 20 feet in the front and go to about 14 feet in the back. There are 8 separate bays, and they will allow people to actually pull in and drop off materials. So that's how these materials get dropped off to those bays. I'm going to flip to the architectural stuff. There you go. Thank you, Chris.
And Jill, the project is currently on septic, and
It
the
absolutely
proposal is to tie into water and sewer.
I can go through that too, sure. So the septic currently uses septic and well water. So the intention is to connect to both town sewer system and town water. At the present time, there is a force main that was put in by the adjacent owner, Eric DeGrazzi, who owns Nomad Realty Trust, which is right here. Nomad Realty Trust has, I don't know, maybe call it 50,000 square feet of area or building space in North Andover, and maybe 200,000 square feet in Middleton. So the property is cut in half between Andover and Middleton. And he was given permission by the town to connect his sewer. He just hasn't done so. He installed the force main but hasn't done so. So with discussions between Mr. Gill, Mr. Spragis, and the DPW inspector, they are in agreement that provided there is a mutual agreement and something put in writing as to the maintenance of the force main, Mr. Gill will be entitled to tap into the existing force main used across the street. So that's how they'll gain access. So there'll be no disturbance, which is great news, of anything in 114, so you don't have to worry about that. As far as the water goes, we also are able to tap into the water line without having to, again, interfere with the very well-used thoroughfare that is 114. And we will, again, have water. And obviously, the septic system, we have no intention of keeping it. It will be completely removed. We may use the water for non-potable purposes, like to maybe water some of the landscaping, which is done frequently. But other than that, all other services will be terminated. So this is just, the reason to present this view is just to explain that there are there are really three different areas to the building. So one area is solely garage space. The other area, the wings essentially is what I call them, are garage space areas. The center of the building is used for the first floor retail with some office space. And then on the second floor, what you see is all office and other spaces incidental. Oh, I can't see the right the second floor. Up here it is. Nope, that's the first floor. So this is the second floor because the building actually, as you can tell, is a two-floor structure. I'm sorry, these aren't my slides. I want to show the, here it is. So basically, you can tell that this is a two-floor structure. The first floor is going to be retail. The second floor is going to be all office space with conference room, bathrooms, obviously hallways, and other uses like little kitchen areas, etc., basically associated with office space. And then again, the retail. Then as you proceed down, you have the garage space, and again, the garage space on the other side.
So which view are we getting here on
Okay.
this so I can...
Of course, of course. So this one is the view from Sharpner's Pond Road. So if you were, as you come up 114 from Middleton, this is really what you would see because that's the view that faces Sharpner's Pond. This is if you pass by the building and you look right on 114, this is what you would see. So essentially what
Wait a second, that's the 114 view? Or
this is the 114 view.
Okay.
Right?
And that's the bottom is
This
the
is
shop.
exactly. So this is the Sharpner's Pond because it's a triangle. So if you will, because of this structure, we are actually going to have one entrance on the Sharpner's Pond side, and then we will have another small entrance on this side. You can't see it on this plan, I don't know why, but there's a vestibule inside, and it is shown on your floor plans. So you have the airlock that's required by the building code now because of the energy code. But we still wanted to have an access door off of the 114 side, so you'd kind of like have just an entrance here and an entrance there.
So the main part of the building it looks sort of contemporary. Is it virtually all glass, or what's the material?
There's a lot of glass. So this particular part of the building is glass, as you can see, and so is it here. But the remainder of it is a mix of metal fabrication. So the new buildings, as they're designing them, are those sheets of metal so that you can have them kind of in big portions, and they don't look like an industrial building with the almost a clapboard-looking structure. Yeah.
See the glass better.
Yeah, but this is definitely, he's right, though. This is glass with stone accents. And then this side of the building, believe it or not, those are metal sheets that you can have.
You have, can you give us any pictures of other buildings that are similar to that have that same material, or a piece of it or something, so that we can get some idea what it looks like. It looks like it's a flat roof. Is it a parapet? What's,
These two buildings are flat roofed buildings, and this building is pitched.
but you've got, one of the buildings is the light color, and it look, are those real windows or faux windows?
Those are actual windows, they're real.
And the other is, what's the material of that other thing that's just got a,
Are you speaking about the things, the part of the building with the trees in front of it?
yeah.
Yeah, that's another, it's same material, believe it or not, as the light colored one. It's just different, it's different, different texture and a different panel. So this, I'm just going to refer to them as colors because I think it's easier. So the glass building, the sides, you have the wood veneer. The entire building will have the wood veneer along the bottom of the entire building going all the way down the side. The yellow, if you will, colored building has larger panels of metal, and they're actually, I mean, I can try and get, you know what I can try and do for the next meeting is try and get you photos, because I can get photos.
That would really be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a terrible time figuring out, this looks like it's like three separate things
Stone
attached to
veneer.
each other.
There is no
Yeah.
wood. There might be some wooden accents, but there's no wood. This is, I can give you, the manufacturers of the buildings actually will give you, pictures of the various panel styles, and I actually have them, and because I've used them before. And this is the type of building where it kind of has a texture to it, so it's all textured. It's no longer that industrial look that you have like a Costco building. It's just not that.
That looks pretty
It's
industrial to me.
Yeah, there's no windows, there's
There's
no
no
breaks,
windows.
no
Well, they just-
articulations, there's nothing. It's
Well,
industrial.
this is, I mean, I have to disagree. I mean, this, you couldn't have more articulation with regard to
Okay,
that.
no, we're not
that's
talking,
fine.
we're talking.
Oh, absolutely. You can't really, you don't really want to have glass in buildings where there's a lot of storage, because they're just going to get destroyed. So that's why there aren't in here, and the point is to really landscape in front of it. And when you look at the actual site design for that particular portion of the building, that's where we are, we are going to have the most landscaping, because we are going to, we don't want to have a blank wall either, and we just showed a couple of trees, but in fact.
So, show me on that
Of course.
what corresponds to that, because I'm having, like, which
I
piece of
agree.
it?
It's very difficult to see. So I'm going to just put this like this so that I can show it better. Hey, Chris, hold on.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe somebody can hold it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, so this part is this.
So the.
This is facing
So like the
114.
end of the building is the gray, start from there, show me where the gray begins, there, yeah, it goes, how far?
Right to there, right, my finger stopped.
Yeah, okay,
And
then
then-
where
and then
does
drop.
how far does the light color go?
Right to here.
See, now that's not proportional.
It is
It
actually.
is. Oh, it is. You can even go and look. It just, to your eye, it may not be, but it's absolutely proportional. You can see all the design measurements on the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the front is simply from this initial jog, obviously, to the corner.
Yeah.
See,
And
maybe
the
you're
other side
thinking,
is symmetrical.
yeah, and this is just like an overhang. Maybe that's why he's thinking that.
Which is,
I
It's
kinda-
about 50% is the gray,
yeah.
the length.
Oh, yeah, it's a long stretch of overhang.
So 50% of the building has no articulation.
And then, Chris is my banner. So then you start here, right? So here's the peak. Here's the corner there. It runs to right there. So where you see the end of the stone facade.
Jog on the plan view.
Yep, there's a jog. And then there's a smaller portion, which is the yellow, and another jog. And then there's the stretch, and there's a stretch.
The stone facade is here,
Yeah, yes, this right here.
or
is
it's,
literally
or it's
running up
back.
there.
Like,
Nope.
is it kicked back or it's on the front?
Yeah, it's on the front. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like the front facing, then it kicks back to this.
Mm-hmm.
Sidewalk
Yeah,
shop.
there's-
Well, yeah, I know it is.
Why is this taller?
So that's
He was
only
trying to add
about
architectural
75%.
features. We are going
The
to
vast
remove them. There is going
majority
to
of
be
the
no.
structure is
See,
the,
right where the green magic, we're not going to
The bottom one?
Yeah.
Fireplace.
On the shop.
Mr. Gill,
Yeah,
it's just-
so the vast
you're asking,
majority
how we
of the
show- you
structure
can see how they
is
look like there's a
is the industrial
fireplace
piece.
sticking up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've already talked about that. That's not going to be there. And that doesn't make much sense architecturally either. So that will go, and obviously that, because that's the vision.
So the length of this piece of roofing from the stretching back is just this length?
It goes a little bit further. See how it ends up popping into here? So it does go beyond that initial jog. It looks like probably about 5 to 7 feet. Yeah.
Well, regardless of how you do it, if you could give us pictures of the materials and also other buildings that are constructed with the same material, so we get some idea of what you're trying to do here.
Oh, easily. Like I said, I can get them from the manufacturer. Yep.
It'd be nice to have something that's close by.
Oh, I'm not going to be able to find, I mean, I can't promise you that. I can merely get you pictures of a building. I don't know that I can find you. I'll ask, but I don't.
Did you have an architect?
Of course, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And the plans are all stamped by him as well.
Okay.
Can I ask you to hold the one up like you did before on
Yes.
the bottom half?
To show you.
So here's what I'm asking.
Thank you.
For the frontage on 114,
Okay, that's this.
what percentage is the nondescript gray of the length of the building fronting 114? It looks to me like the gray is about 50%.
Close.
Yep.
Very
Is that
close.
correct? Okay, so now let me ask my other question. You can hold that up on the top part, because I want to look at the bottom one.
This one.
Yeah, so hold it above the bottom one.
Yep.
There you go.
This. Oh,
What percentage is the nondescript gray of the total length of the frontage on Sharpner's Pond?
probably close to 3/4.
Yes, that's why I came up with 75%.
Yeah, well, I bet you're right.
That's a lot of nondescript.
Yeah, and we definitely plan on landscaping in front of it, doing things with regard to that, because that's the portion also where,
As you said, when you come up 114, that's really the part you're going to see.
well, the part you'll see is this. You really, I'm trying to remember how much, and I drive by there 2 times a week, and my guess is you see not as much as you'd think, because it's pretty far down the street, and there's a lot of tree. I mean, the area is not completely.
But
yeah,
it's still on public road, and you're going to see 75% industrial
Right.
building, which is in a business zone. You know,
Yeah.
and it's a residential.
I mean, it's supposedly
Yeah.
a retail
Right,
use
yes.
zone, and the overwhelming facade is an industrial facade. It has nothing to do with retail. There's no retail buildings that you would see anywhere that would look like that.
None.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, please.
Why would you not have put as their point, the picture, here, these offices like in front of that and have the storage behind the offices so that you don't see the storage as much from the road? You know what I mean? Like you can walk in the front to the retail space and you can drive in behind to the storage space that's not really visible.
I mean, I suppose.
I mean, it's a different design altogether, but it seems like it
it
would
literally
be
means just lifting and putting it behind and pushing it over.
like, yeah, putting this here instead, in front of.
I mean, I suppose it's just not the architectural design, because
Yeah, I know.
it it just doesn't work that well for us, because as you can see, this is the rear of the building. So here it is with the rear, and we do have a couple of, we do have some area underneath that's also usable for essentially basement space. So we capture that. I guess by putting it in front of it, we don't have access to the outdoor, and that was one of the reasons why we would prefer to keep it that way. I mean, again, we do plan on, and I think maybe what would help is if I show you, we can give you, if you will, a perspective with regard to the landscaping to show what you will.
The landscaping's not going to do it. We
Well, it
really,
actually-
I think what you're hearing from us is we'd like you to figure out some ways to soften up the building.
Soften up the gray part.
Yeah,
I don't know what else to call it.
yeah.
Well, I mean, what you've got at the front there, the thing that looks like the ski lodge.
It kind of,
You know, if you can take that motif a little bit further down, even if it's what do they call it, the fake, the full?
Parapet.
A full ski
Parapet.
lodge.
So you know what, also what is the big rage now, if you will, with regard to these types of buildings, is to put that parapet, so when you come in, you really do want a flat roof on these buildings, but when you come in, so when you look at them, you put on a facade, so you come out and you kind of make it look like it's a pitched roof.
Yeah.
And you can do that. So, I mean, I think we can probably soften it up with some decorative attributes. I understand what you're saying.
Well, I mean, if you were here the other night, one of the hearings that we didn't do tonight, but they're doing a building further down on 114 where it has a use that's prone to it does have elements of metals and similar to this, but what they've done is they put a lot of work in it to design it in such a way that it looks attractive. And even though it's a use that's not, a direct retail use, because in that area other uses are allowed, they still have made the building pretty attractive, even given the way they've constructed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can, I hear what you're saying, and I understand. So basically, soften it up, try and
You keep
make
pointing
this
to
line.
the yellow thing. It's the
Well,
gray.
but yeah, you can't just soften this and not soften that, right? So we're going to soften this, and as I said, we'll try and do some sort of a treatment. I know exactly what we're going to end up doing. I don't know here. I'm not the architect, so I'm just saying, okay, we'll
The
soften it up.
yellow,
But here,
isn't
we'll
the
do it
problem.
there.
I think we could live with the yellow. It's the mass of gray.
of ski lodges.
And I think the gray might be an issue color-wise too. Maybe gray just screams industrial. I
Yeah.
don't know. And actually, the gray and
Your thought about
the
the
stone.
things along the top that can soften it. Maybe some brick or something down along the
Well, we do,
bottom.
it's all stone treatment in the bottom.
Yeah, the brown.
Which is gray.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's natural stone, so, yeah, it's like the
Okay,
browns.
well then
and
make the other
grays.
one white or something, it's.
I don't think you want it white.
I don't think you want it
I
white
don't
either.
think you want it white.
White's too
But
stark.
we'll play with colors. I mean, again, this is our, it's essentially our initial meeting with you, because last time we really didn't get very far talking about the project. So these comments are going to be helpful. We're going to go back, we're going to revise, and then I'm going to show you actual pictures of the materials. I'm going to show you pictures of buildings that actually have used those materials, and then we're going to soften up the facades for you.
Is this like a wood beam?
It is.
Like ski lodgy would be?
I mean, it's actually, you know what it is? It has elements of,
I'm trying to visualize.
I mean, it's more sort of like a mountain appeal. That's really
Yeah.
what, I think that's what they call the design. And it's intended to hold up the roof. I mean, quite frankly, that's what it does.
Okay, anything else, Gene, for tonight?
I have a couple of,
course.
the front the entrance ways.
Yes.
One of them is pretty much across the street from the daycare. I think they line up, and I think that might be an issue.
Let's just pull that up.
Yeah. And then are you having an
They don't
in,
line up.
are you having an in and out? Because we all know that anybody pulling out of that road, you might sit there for 10 minutes if you're trying to take a left, because no one is going to ever let you go.
Right, the nice thing about that is that we have two-way traffic completely around the building. So let's say we had a little bit of stacking here, for example.
Right.
Someone could come out here and stack a little bit further if that ever was a need.
Right. So, okay, so it's going to be two-way on both, on in and out, okay.
That's correct.
And isn't that their driveway across, right?
This is the driveway here.
Yeah, so it's pretty, okay.
It's definitely offset.
You generally want to line them up together, don't you?
Well, this is where the existing, we lined this up where the existing, just so happens that's where the existing driveway comes into the property. So there's already a curb cut there, and
Okay,
it sort of
that's-
allows us to line up our driveway
Okay.
with the
Okay.
exit.
So the only thing is, are we gonna have any problems with, so they can't get out, they'll just have to go to the other one, which is going to happen, because,
From time to time, I've seen it myself.
well, just because not your traffic even, but two cars on the road will like I said, you can sit there for a long time trying to pull out, and, but it doesn't make sense to probably push it back a little farther so they can get out that way, does it? Okay. Dumpster pad is in the 100-foot buffer zone. I think that was on Lisa's comments, or was that conservation comments?
So it was a Board of Health comment about
Okay.
the setback from the dumpster itself
Okay.
to the storage garage, so we've separated that to comply with that.
But it's also in the 100-foot. You probably want to get the dumpster out of that too, if you can.
We can take a look at that. We did want to try to keep it to the rear, if you will, of the building.
Okay.
I know that Lisa had quite a few comments, mostly related to stormwater, but that wasn't one of them. It didn't come up at Concom yet, but if you will, the intent of the design, of course, is to allow stuff to, come onto the parking lot surface, which flows in this direction towards our catch basin. So it should be okay. It'll be enclosed, of course. There's a detail on one of the detail sheets.
And the fieldstone wall you're going to do out front, how high, how long?
So are you referring to the stone treatment of the veneer on the building?
No,
or-
the fieldstone wall.
The back wall, Chris. Like we're moving him, I think something about this one.
Are you talking about in the rear of the site, or?
I made the comments last time. Where's your fieldstone wall? You have one, I know that.
Yeah, so we have a wall to the rear that's hidden from view. Essentially, it's holding up our parking lot, if you will. So it'll only be viewed from the wetland area, which is all woods, if you will.
Okay.
The type of structure are sort of the larger prefabbed concrete blocks that are 2 feet tall by 4 feet wide, rather large, and they'll be stacked in order to create that
2
separation.
feet, the block's going to be what, 2 feet by 4 feet?
That's right.
Okay. So it's not I think it said fieldstone I had in my notes.
I thought there was something out here that was.
Yeah, there's also there is a
Something on
fieldstone
that
wall in the
border
front
you
of the
can
bench
see,
too.
Yeah.
So that's,
It's just a decorative landscape wall, just meant to be,
So are we talking about
Yeah.
the sign?
I just looked at it, you said it's a landscape wall. If you keep going to the landscape design,
Let's just go back real
I
quick.
think that's when,
Yeah, let's move to landscaping plan.
so the retaining wall is 2 foot by 4 foot blocks, and how high?
it's under 4 feet.
It's two-tiered, if you will, to break up the massing of the wall, and each section is 4 feet, less than 4 feet high. Let's see.
All the way, I think, the last page, no?
Okay.
It's up here. Here they are, these. Yeah, they're just, all there, it's landscaping features to, that's it, to break up the landscaping. So there are these two walls. They're going to be small. I don't think they're ever above, what, 2 feet? They're small.
Will you have to raise the level of the property, or are you going to keep the grade that it's on right now?
Okay, but back to my question.
Yeah.
How big are the fieldstone walls again? How high and how long?
2 feet.
Let me give you my scale here. So they're 2 feet high,
2
they're
feet,
more
maybe.
decorative than anything else.
Okay.
And as far as the length goes, each one of these massing here on each of the walls is about 25 to 28 feet long. Approximately 27 feet
But there's no
long.
structural quality to them. They don't hold anything back.
Well, there's a significant grade difference from 114. It drops down, so.
Yep.
So you're sure that they're not going to be used for retaining at all?
They are not, it's not a retained feature.
Okay.
So if you take a look at our grading, we have quite a bit of a flat area between the edge of the back edge of curb and where the grade sort of dips down. We have a little swale-like feature, so we have land slopes in this direction and then in that direction from the parking area.
So those are going to be on the high point?
They're going to be on the flat part of the land behind the back edge of curb that's about 7 feet deep.
Okay. And why a bench on 114? Right
Again,
between.
it's all visual features to soften
Okay,
it.
but I mean,
it.
it's literally on 114 though. Putting a bench up there to promote people walking up to an area right on the 114.
This is the benches right down here.
That's right here.
It's between the fieldstone walls.
It's just meant, again, to be a decorative, pretty feature.
And it's on the private property, and it's really just sort of for the benefit of the folks that are in the building.
Yeah. Okay, it just, the grass area back here would make it a lot more safer. I mean, it's, because that's going to be at the top of the slope.
Sure,
So
which area did you have in mind? That might be a
Well,
better location.
You got that big open area, which is
Sure.
more level, it's not not on the hill, it's not right.
Yep.
I just don't think promoting people going up to 114 is, or just even if you're driving down the road and all of a sudden there's someone on the side of the road, there's no sidewalks there, it's going to be distracting if people are walking up right on the top of 114. It looks like it's only 10 feet off the road, that bench.
Oh, the right of way.
Oh, it's the right of way? Okay.
That's
Is
right.
that the road or the right?
No,
Oh, okay.
that's
Oh,
really
okay, that's
wide
not.
right
Oh, okay.
right
There's
there,
okay,
yeah.
then that's not a
Yeah.
problem then. Okay. I was thinking that was the road line. That's the right of way line. Okay.
You can certainly find it. I think
No, that's the
there's a
road. Okay,
home for
I
it.
was thinking that was the road line.
So,
Wrong
okay.
line.
Yeah, well, point still remains, it's probably better for the other spot.
Will you have to add fill?
Oh, yes, let's address that real quick
How
here.
much?
So I don't have a calculation
Just-
for you because it's going to be quite a bit of fill.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with the site at all,
Oh,
it
yeah.
drops off significantly from the road, and it will continue to do so in the proposed condition. But we are lifting the grade up. For the next meeting, we can come up with a cubic yard number for
Well,
you.
just about how high do you figure you have to raise it?
Right, so let me give you an example. I would say that the most fill that we're going to have is probably, back in this area here. Existing grade is 136. Actually, we're close to grade there. How do you like that? So, let's see, 136 back here, and we are proposed 136 and existing, 136. So there could be as much as 10 feet of fill across a portion of the site back here, and then it goes less than 10 feet as we approach in this direction. That, of course, would be, brought in and
The structure that's there, looks like it's almost a story down below the
It is.
114.
yeah, it is. Just to give you an idea, again, this is where that structure is, this rectangle here. The elevation at this square is approximately, in the existing condition, 137, 138, and we're proposing a first floor elevation of 149. And so there's quite a difference in grade right there.
Yeah.
And we're still,
And what is the road, just to?
right, just to give you an idea, we're at 148, 146. The site also drops off in this direction. So at this particular location here, the first floor of the building is really level with Sharpness Pond at this location, but out at the intersection, we're up at 154. And so the first floor elevation is about 5 feet below the grade of 114 at about the intersection of the two roads. So it'll be down a little bit. You'll see more of the second story, if you will, more than the part of the building that's closer to the ground.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any others? No. Okay, so we'll continue to work with Lisa.
Oh, absolutely, and like I said, we'll make sure we get those we'll get perspectives for you, and then we'll get an updated rendering as well. So you continue it till
For the next hearing.
do you move for it? You make a motion to do it? Oh,
No,
No?
it's fine.
Evidence is still being heard.
And you're okay, we're continuing for the next hearing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
575 Osmond Street, into retirement.
Actually, the next two items on the agenda is just continuing talk about potential warrant articles to try to start to focus on language, whether you're supportive of what's been presented. So for the Edgewood proposal, and I think this meeting, we do have a couple of abutters. I did receive a couple phone calls. We can quickly review the conceptual plan for those who haven't seen it. And in your packet was some draft language. So at this point, for those in the audience, this is strictly a conceptual plan for discussion purpose Bob Capola is here from Edgewood. He can give an overview of the scope of the project. And as discussed in previous hearing, and I think I've discussed with a few people on the phone, what this proposal entails would require a warrant article at town meeting and town vote in support of this. So Bob, you can just do a couple minutes to present.
Bob Capola, Edgewood Retirement Community. And what you have there is we're looking at a small home project as we're describing it, which is you have 4 sections. You see there's 4 pods that come out off of 2 buildings. There are 10 bedrooms per pod. And then that center area between both buildings would be kitchen facilities to prepare food for the residents, administrative offices, meeting space, activity spaces, et cetera, things like that for the residents that would live there. It is considered an assisted living piece. What we're working with the state currently is to determine whether they classify it as an enhanced living. There are 2 definitions or 3 definitions. It's not a skilled nursing facility, which is important. So there is not skilled nursing that will go on in those locations. And so we'll certainly iron that piece out with the state as we move forward, but we believe it'll be licensed. It'll be licensed through the state, but it should be the enhanced living.
So that distinction is the licensing distinction?
That's correct. That's correct. There are not kitchens in the rooms. The residence, it is a bedroom with a bathroom and then a common space out. All of the cooking facilities would be done by Edgewood staff for them. But it would be in what we consider it would be a group setting or a home setting. So you would have 10 folks that would be sitting at a dining room table to have dinner together, breakfast, lunch, etc. And the whole idea with that concept of the small home piece is to draw folks out of their rooms, because folks with dementia, with long corridors, long hallways, etc., they don't come out if it's too confusing. So you're trying to draw them out, and you try to draw them out with the smell of food, with activities and all those pieces. So that's why you have that configuration.
And so I believe we have a couple of people representing the school, the daycare, correct? So as far as the locus, you'll see in relation to, I think, actually it's not there. So this darker orange piece is the parcel where you just saw those 2 units really in the lower right-hand corner of the orange. And the school parcel, I believe, is on this parcel right here in the middle. Okay? So that's in relation. And the entranceway on that plan we just saw has not really been determined at this point, but we did discuss coming in off of the small section of the dark orange in the lower right-hand corner, if possible.
Is that the...
If you could come up and introduce yourself, come sit at the table, we won't bite.
I'm Barbara Hartrick, and I'm on the board of the Family Cooperative Preschool. I guess we have a few questions. I don't know if this is the appropriate time.
No, this is fine. This is fine. We're preliminary, so neighbors can discuss what they need to discuss. So
I guess first, in terms of communication, as an abutter, will we be getting communications? We just kind of happened to find out that this was occurring.
It's a warrant article. So if it's to proceed for a warrant article, typically it's not notified to abutters. However, for the mill change in the bylaw last year, we did notify abutters. There's been other projects. If there's direct abutters, we can. I mean, it's the board's discretion.
Yeah, we probably would.
Yeah.
But the idea would be that this is a zoning discussion to basically accommodate a building structure like this in that area. And what would happen is that there would be official public hearing that we would have. And the applicant would explain what they want to do. We would decide whether to recommend approval of that article or not. We may even make it a planning board article if we think if it makes sense to do that. And then we would go to town meeting with that recommendation, and the town would vote at town meeting on the article. And part of what it would be is that if, let's say, it were approved at town meeting, then there would be, in order to build the thing, the applicant would have to come back to the planning board and submit all the plans, and there would be a public hearing in front of the planning board.
So that's when it would be more like the kind of presentation that occurred before this
The
one?
super detailed presentation that, but bear in mind that there's two public hearings. There's one to view the zoning article to allow you to do it, and then there's the public hearing for the specific application, and they're different.
Okay. So some of my questions are really much more specific, I think, to whatever is, whatever actually is going to be built there, assuming that.
Well, I mean, it's to put it sort of simply is that, that under the existing zoning, it's called the Continuing Care Retirement Center, there's probably two features of it that the way it works today have to be changed, and that's what's going to be changed in the zoning article. One is to increase the number of total units that are going to be built on the property from 250 to 300. It would allow 300 as opposed to 250. And the second thing would be it would allow the applicant to place those units in the R1 portion of the property, subject to a limitation that it's only 10% of the total. One of the things that's the value of this process, I think the applicant has been very forthcoming about what they want to do. They've worked with us back and forth of different ideas. We want to make the new buildings as inobtrusive as possible, and the more planning we do in advance before even the zoning is done, the better off I think everybody is, and they've been very forthcoming in terms of that, site visits and so forth, and I think they'd be willing to talk to you as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't have to talk here, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you don't have to talk here,
And
but
the missing largest portion of it is not buildable area to be set aside. So
I mean, then what would happen is the rest of that property would be set aside and never be built upon. That's sort of part of it too, that obviously from a town perspective, that's pretty attractive, and that the town would have the rights to continue the trail
system.
The access easements through there along the lake. So from a public access point of view, it's a big plus. And so, because otherwise, what would have happened is the town would have had to, if we were interested, would have to purchase the property ourselves. Mm-hmm. And this way, there might be building on a small portion of the property, but the rest of it is effectively as if it's protected. So.
Yeah. And we're already in conversation with the trustees of the reservation to do that with that 15-plus acres, to do that in some sort of a conservation restriction.
We just would like to be in the loop as well.
Absolutely.
So that's...
Okay.
So what's your thought in terms of language?
In terms of, you said there's three options that you have?
No, for this one, there's just, it's bread and fruit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably one of those things. I think the way you've laid it out, we talked about using round numbers, 10% and 300, I think kind of makes sense in my mind. I probably want to spend a little bit of time thinking about it, but I don't know, from my personal perspective, it looks okay. If you think about it, it doesn't change all that much, which is one of the advantages.
It still limits it, allows it R1, but on a very limited scale.
Yeah. So, does anybody else have any sort of, that'll be everybody's homework again to think about.
I thought we left it off that the next step was they were going to the selectmen, in all honesty. But I didn't think they were getting back to us again.
Is that they'd go to selectmen?
I thought there was going to be a discussion, wasn't there?
Well, they kind of don't have to, because the selectmen don't really have any direct jurisdictional responsibility, but,
At some point, they would go in terms of getting favorable or unfavorable action from them, but prior to that, we'd submit the warrant article.
Yeah.
And
that would be one of the questions is since this is a collaboration, I think this is a case once we move in final language, it should be a planning board article.
Okay, so that's...
Yeah.
And we understand that, but we wanted to get back before you in the final form and get your consensus, planning board consensus, that this is the way to approach it, and then we can.
Yeah, and I think it's hardening, Paul. I just give us one more chance to think about it.
Sure.
Yeah. So, good. We thank you.
And one other thing, Mr. Chairman,
By the way, could you identify yourself on
sorry.
the record? You look like a suspicious character.
Paul
so,
Hedstrom, I'm working with Edgewood and with the planning board to try to move this process along. The issue of identifying any increase in terms of the type of housing, it's crystal clear to us that you can do it in the decision, the special permit. You know, we'd come in, if this all processes and we get the rezoning passed, we'd be before you with a special permit to amend the existing CCRC. You would then identify if it's going to increase 40 units, it would be assisted living by your decision. So you can lock in the type of housing on that basis and avoid any rezoning language that limits the type of housing. So.
Right. I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
Just from a planning standpoint, being able to get the conservation easement on that property is a real selling
It's a big
point.
deal, yeah.
You know? And that's why I think why we should be sponsoring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. We just need to lock the whole deal in advance. So. Okay,
so-
moving right along to our super favorite topic.
yeah, so this one's fairly similar, although this one does have alternatives. So I was hoping to actually narrow this down a little bit tonight. 1679 Osgood Street, the applicant is
So
proposing.
I told you the answer is just to put a little retail thing in and they get the building inspector to say it.
Mr. Chairman, Kevin Foley for Mr. Lawler. I also have Tyler Monroe with me here tonight.
So I talked to Kevin, we're kind of in the same state, the same alternatives are presented along with the proposal Kevin had submitted. The applicant's looking to allow the use of landscaping or contractor yard type language within the CDD3. Peter Breen spoke at the last meeting. There are similar uses here, although they were put in place prior to 2008 when this zone went into effect. I really looked at language within, I believe it was Industrial 2 that had contractor yard language, as well as CDD 1 and 2, which has some language that restricts outdoor storage of items and ensures by special permit that things were screened, and other restrictions on type of what can be stored outside. So essentially the three alternatives, Kevin's is I think the broadest and just combines it with a retail use in number 1, which John, that kind of speaks to. Maybe if there was more of a retail component, it might fall into an allowed use. The first alternative is labeled alternative 1, allows the use.
Do we have anything here that this is alternative 1?
So that allows the use as by right. And my concern with that is it leaves some subjectivity to the planner to deem the screening around the outdoor storage as substantial or lacking. And then alternative 2 is presented as a special permit to allow the use and puts the planning board as the authority to make sure that things like screening and visual impact to residential abutters is protected.
Just for the record, what I proposed was not the most artfully drafted warrant article, and we're perfectly comfortable with what Jane came up with as alternative 1. We talked about it at the last meeting. It would add the language. She took the language that's already appears in other areas and added contractor yard as well, rather than just landscaping, and then all the restrictions that go along with, including the screening.
Do you have copies?
Oh, did you see that, Tyler? I'm sorry.
So again, the applicant intends to go forward on this, that he would like the planning board's support of the article. However, the alternative is a citizen's petition, and they're aware of that. The citizen petition deadline appears to be March 7th for those warrant articles. So again, we're just getting near the timeframe of.
So this is alternative one. Where's alternative two?
You don't have alternatives?
No, they're the top, alternative one.
No,
I just haven't.
forget alternative two.
No.
This
No,
is, and who wrote this?
Gene did.
Okay.
Like you have it on your iPad? It was sent in the packet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Last time, too.
Yes, it was sent both weeks.
yeah, it was in the
Isn't
package.
alternative two just what is struck in point one under alternative one? Oh, no. It had some.
Here's an alternative two. Alternative two allows it as a use by a special permit. So, Dave, if you and John kind of look that one over. I should have one more here. I really like to steal the notes back.
Sorry, Gene.
See, the one problem with, as I look at this, is if you think about it, where we list everything, Gene, about adding it, it feels almost like a decision. It's, you know, if you think about it, there's more here for the contractor's yard than there is just about for everything else for the rest of the district uses. And it's, not that there's anything, I understand exactly what you're trying to do, but what I worry about it is this is, as I look at it over the years, having been involved in zoning changes now for 30 years and having written a lot of them myself, the problem is what makes sense at any one point in time collectively starts to fall apart.
Yep.
And that's the risk that I see with this, is that it's very specific. You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do
And that's
this.
because it's taken from the requirement of a special permit in CDD 1 and 2, and
Is that language in CCD 1 and 2, that
Yep.
contract yard?
it's allowed by special permit.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it takes it out of special permit, where alternative 2 leaves it in special permit, and you'll see the same type of criteria itemized out.
Seems to fit better.
Yeah, uses
that's-
allowed by special permit have a little bit more detail, so
Right, so that's-
I'm sort of inclining more to a special permit use than by right.
I think it takes the subjectivity out of it.
Yeah.
That was my concern with alternative 1, is it would leave the planner in a position to provide the authority over it.
Yeah,
And
I mean, this
puts it by
way
special-
we allow it, but we just manage our way through it, so.
And if it were to be by special permit, would you entertain it for CD 1, 2, and 3, or special permit for 3?
Why are we putting it in 1 and 2 now? I mean,
I wouldn't put it on 1 and 2 because 1 and 2 were smaller, right?
Yeah, the lots are
The
different.
problem is they're smaller lots, and some of them, there's no way even to put something like that, because the lots aren't even big enough.
look at that little straggly lot they gotta put there.
No. No, but 1 and 2 is that CCD 1 and 2 are they're minuscule size lots. There's barely any lots that's over an acre big, so these have bigger footprints of the lot, even though it has that tail to it.
Okay, so currently, for outdoor storage, display, sales of materials, products, and goods in connection with retail uses, provided that permissible land area devoted to specially permitted outdoor use may not exceed 20% in CDD 1 and 30% in CDD 2. So right now, it does kind of differentiate size of lots and things in 1 and 2. This can go specifically for separate it out from everything and put it as CDD 3 only.
I think it should be 3 only. I
Okay.
mean, I think
That's fine.
that would just be sort of my inclination.
Okay.
So the special permit makes it iffy for anybody. I mean, that's not a given that you can do that.
No, that's correct. That's correct. But it does allow it as a use by special permit. And given our inclination is not to, the problem ends up being is it puts the planner in an awkward position right now. And I think if you get, remember, if you think about it, if this is something you're planning on doing over the next year, I think you get the consensus of this board that that we're okay with the notion. I can't speak for everybody else, but I think there's, you've been here, you've seen what people think. I think there's a certain amount of sympathy for it, but to just do it under a controlled environment. So.
And in that environment, would you think the planning board would support it, or?
Well, I don't know. I think I would be okay with it, but I can't speak for everybody else.
I don't think we've ever really said it until we've had the warrant published, and that's when we actually vote on it and discuss it.
Well, officially,
Yeah.
but if, I mean, to some degree,
But
if we
it's submitted
should
by-
let our sentiments out, I mean, if it's the kind of thing that, and it's good to have a debate on this, is if it's the kind of thing you say, I don't want to do it because I think Lucent's going to take off, I don't think it should even be allowed by special permit, fine. I could live with it by special permit, given that there's a bunch of them out there already today, and I wouldn't have a problem with it, but, I don't know how everybody else feels.
I'm the same.
Okay.
So that would be, so if you saw it really develop down there and it was really going toward the side of retail more than anything, you'd look at it and say, well, I don't agree with it on a special permit, it doesn't fit. Whereas where it's heading now, you'd say, well, yeah, I mean, there's not much going on down there. There's a bunch of those places like that, and it fits.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's really some
practically
control
speaking
over it.
is, and if the thing was going to retail, well, the values would go up and you'd end up selling anyway, so I think it would all line up reasonably fairly.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, my only thing was, it's just, and I mean, it's going backwards, but I understand where you're coming from with it, but it was kind of there and taken away, and,
Yeah, I don't know.
It wasn't the intent, though, because even retail uses doesn't allow outdoor sales. So I don't know, I know you said that they may have been discussed, but the whole intent of all the CDD 3 was not to have that type of use.
Yeah, I have to go back, I mean, to tell you the
Yeah,
truth,
but
I
I
have
mean,
amnesia
it demolished
about that.
Industrial Est. I mean,
No,
Yeah.
industrial S exists.
no, it doesn't, because Contractors Yards in Industrial Est.
Yeah, but there is
That's why I'm
industrial
there.
S still in town, yeah.
No, that's why I'm there, though, but I mean, it demolished, and as we spoke and that was written, again, I take blame for dropping the ball and not seeing the final written thing that went to town meeting.
Yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, at this point, I got a collective amnesia. I think I'm the only one who was on board when that happened. I have to go back and talk to Rowan or somebody and find out if they remember. But I kind of think that the idea was to upscale the uses because we thought the Osgood landing thing was going to take off, and we wanted to accommodate those uses. And that's the way we did it. And but I don't remember. And I think here what we're saying is we think this is a reasonable compromise given where we are today. So
No, I agree, but my interpretation of it was to, because I attended all those meetings with Kurt Bellavance, and it was kind of the Me Too thing. It's like, well, they're going to do that across the street. We should have the option to be able to do this retail and stuff, but it was kind of in addition to your industrial.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, at this point, is
And I see where you're
as
coming
they
from.
say, it
I
is what it
understand.
is. So
Yeah, I
we just
understand.
have to make do. So
Yeah.
let's just think about it. We'll do our homework, and next meeting we'll decide. Maybe we'll have a discussion again, decide what we want to do.
And
So.
I'll look to craft it a little bit more
Yeah.
towards a warrant article following the
Yeah.
special permit.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you for your time.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Woodland Estates, this will take all of 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Woodland Estates subdivision, I think it was approved in the late 90s. It's comprised of Oxbow, Colonial, and Puritan, I believe is on there.
Where is it?
Off of 114, so if you're heading out 114 on the right, one of those newer subdivisions.
Okay.
Colonial, it's like across from the Girl Scouts building, right up there.
From where?
The Girl Scouts building, I think Colonial is directly across from that.
Oh, okay.
On 114. So recently, we had some inquiries from homeowners. The project's never been closed out. They're looking to close out conservation certificates. And the developer has passed away. Everything has transferred to his ears. It was a PRD, so it has open space parcels that were never conveyed to the town or a nonprofit or the Conservation Commission. So we'd like to...
Is there any bond?
There is a bond. However, the remaining bond for the planning department is effectively the street acceptance piece, and that's really where it's gotten to, other than the open space, is it would be ready for street acceptance. The bond's grown from approximately $12,000 to $31,000 because of interest.
We got that much interest?
Wow. It's been since the late 90s.
Oh, remember, we're talking it was real interest.
And we didn't return interest, so as they got their reductions, we typically held on to the interest piece. We didn't, if they got 50% reduction, we didn't necessarily give them the interest associated. Conservation, however, has just over $100,000 in bond money, so it's fairly substantial. The town manager requested council to do a research of the whole file and find out the status of the ownership of both the open space as well as the roadway. Their document came back, it was in your packet. Essentially, I'm looking for approval to move forward on 2 different criteria. One is to allow the treasurer's office to consult with the tax title attorney to look to foreclose on the open space parcels so that the town can gain ownership of those. Effectively, that puts a conservation restriction on them. They'd be owned by us.
Yeah, whatever it is that takes to adjudicate that, I think we should do, yeah.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to allow conservation and myself to work with town council to give notice to the parties of interest that the work must be completed by a certain date, and if it's not completed by that date, that we would proceed through seizing the bond and move towards street acceptance.
And how much work needs to be done?
Well, conservation, that's in question because it's...
But how about for the planning board?
Planning board, we already have the street layout plan. Tim believes we can work with the recorded plan in terms of the as-built for street acceptance. It's really the taking over the open space parcels, and then we can go forward.
Now, just one question. Should we do it in that order? Because it'll cost the town money to take the open spaces. Can't we notify them that
Well,
we're
the open space piece is through the tax title council.
Right.
So they can proceed.
But the point is, if we can find any parties of interest, maybe they'll just be willing to do it.
Do it
And the enticement
opposed
to
to-
them will be that
Because it'll cost us more.
But this would be simultaneous, so we'll notify those parties of interest as well.
But why not give them like 10 days before we start the tax take? Because it costs money for us to take the tax. Give them a chance first before we start that process. That's my only point.
Yep. So we can work through council.
Yeah.
So-
Because we're not going to get the tax money on if we take it. We're not going to. So.
So if you guys just want a motion that we can proceed on those 2 items?
Sure. So moved.
That you're in support?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good.
Okay. That's that. Those other miscellaneous correspondence that you may have received related to the establishment of the Osgood Committee that was submitted by the chair of the ZBA. Subsequent to that, the ZBA has named Ellen McIntyre to serve as their representative. So you were copied on them, so I gave you copies of the letter and the town manager's response to that letter.
So we have the consent item related to open meeting law complaint, and then we have the executive session. Just a question to town council. Should we do the open session consent item first?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read something here related to this. So to put the topic into context is a complaint alleging an open meeting law violation has been filed by 1600 Osgood Solar LLC, which is the applicant for site plan approval of a 6-megawatt solar facility at 1600 Osgood Street. In essence, the complaint alleges that the board did not follow the open meeting law when it issued site plan approval with conditions on November 23rd, 2015, because the board allegedly did not properly deliberate upon or properly issue the written decision. The Attorney General's office enforces the open meeting law. On behalf of the board, Eric Kafori wrote the Attorney General and informed her office that the board would be meeting tonight to discuss the open meeting law complaint and possibly vote tonight to confirm the November 23rd, 2015 decision. I do not believe this board violated the open meeting law. Nevertheless, Town Council advises that if the board in open session agrees that its November 23rd, 2015 decision was proper and agrees with the conditions stated as stated in the decision, then the board should vote to confirm the November 23rd, 2015 site plan approval with conditions, and then the Attorney General would be advised accordingly. And that, just for your information, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 23B, which is part of the open meeting law, states in part, any remedial action taken by the public body in response to a complaint under this subsection shall not be admissible as evidence against the public body that a violation occurred in any later administrative or judicial proceeding relating to such alleged violation. So, I therefore open up to discussion by the board as to whether you agree with the November 23rd, 2015 decision and all its conditions, and whether somebody wants to make a motion to confirm that decision. So I would sort of entertain a motion to have the board reconfirm or confirm its November 23rd, 2015 decision regarding 1600 Osgood Solar LLC.
I'll make a motion to...
Okay, wait a second. We may have some exact language here that...
Okay.
Just a question.
Motion, second discussion?
Yeah.
Can only the four of us?
Yes, it'll only be the four of us because, Regina didn't vote on it, so that's a procedural point, so.
I move that the board vote to confirm its November 23rd, 2015 decision granting site plan approval with conditions for a 6-megawatt solar facility at 1600 Osgood Street.
Okay. Ooh.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show it was a 4-0 vote, and because Regina didn't vote in the original vote, she can't, and Laura is not here. So, okay. So now that we're done that, we will move to our next topic, which is the executive session.
How about do we want to approve the meeting minutes? So
okay, let's do that quickly, yeah.
Because otherwise we have to come back out.
Okay, yeah.
2 comments on the meeting minutes. Line 40, line 41, a conceptual sketch of the barn concept 2 was presented that gives, line 40, both the vehicle and people or person has to be added after the and. And line 41, strike the 2, and that's it.
Okay.
Move we approve the minutes as amended.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, now again, how do we do our vote to go into executive session?
I move to go into executive session for consultation with town council for confidential legal advice and to discuss litigation in the case of 1600 Osgood Solar LLC versus North Andover Planning Board. And the chair declared that an open meeting would be detrimental to the town's litigation strategy, and we will not return to open session.
Okay, so motion made, and does somebody want to second that?
Second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Regina, do you want to start?
I agree.
You'll vote to go into executive session?
I vote to go into executive session.
Okay.
I vote to go into executive session.
And I vote to go into executive session.
Mr. Chairman, you declared that it would be detrimental to stay in open session.
That is correct. Yes, detrimental. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Good.